Obsession is feared by the weak, but mastered by the powerful. Most men live in a scattered mind, distracted, diluted, inconsistent, easily broken by the smallest inconvenience. Their focus is fragile, their purpose is negotiable, their discipline collapses the moment reality becomes uncomfortable. But there exists another type of man, rare, dangerous, and unrecognizable to the modern world. A man whose mind locks onto a target like a predator. A man who eliminates noise, ignores temptation, and transforms his entire identity around a singular aim. A man who understands that obsession is not madness. It is the highest form of clarity. Obsession is not unhealthy when directed toward growth. It is the engine of greatness. It is the blueprint of mastery. It is the force that sharpens your identity and burns off everything weak, confused, or unfocused inside you. This video is not for men who want balance. This video is not for men who want comfort. This video is for the man who wants to forge himself into something unshakable, something singular, something inevitable. If you are ready to understand the psychological mechanics, identity restructuring, and behavioral rewiring required to build a mind that never breaks, welcome to the Obsession Principle. Rule 1. Destroy the scattered mind. Distraction is not an accident. It is a psychological attack. Every platform, every notification, every meaningless desire competing for your attention is engineered to weaken you. A scattered mind cannot achieve depth. A scattered mind cannot build greatness. A scattered mind cannot dominate anything, not even itself. To become obsessive, you must first kill fragmentation. Most men live in a cognitive state psychologists call attentional diffusion. Their goals are vague. Their environment is chaotic. Their minds drift. Their discipline is conditional. Their focus is borrowed, not built. But obsession requires the opposite. Attentional singularity, the restructuring of your mental energy into a single unified direction. Here is the truth men fear. You cannot become exceptional while remaining available to everything. Obsession begins when you consciously starve your mind of everything that does not feed your purpose. This is the point where average men quit because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of silence, stillness, or depth. Their mind demands stimulation. Your mind, from now on, must demand precision. To destroy the scattered mind, you must confront 3 enemies: internal noise, emotional clutter, overthinking, lack of clarity; external noise, digital overstimulation, social pressure, constant interruptions; identity noise, the old version of you that still desires comfort. Obsession is impossible while these noises exist. Your job is to eliminate them with surgical brutality. Silence is not emptiness, it is the foundation of intensity. Focus is not calm, it is controlled aggression. Obsession is not chaos, it is clean, cold, and sharp. You are not becoming focused, you are killing every part of you that isn't. Rule 2. Build the internal lock. Obsession is impossible without a mental lock, the internal mechanism that prevents you from drifting, hesitating, or negotiating with yourself. Most men don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because their mind is unlocked, open, vulnerable, accessible to every impulse, every distraction, every emotional fluctuation. A man without an internal lock is like a fortress without gates. Anything can walk in. Anything can pull him off his path. He becomes a slave to his moods, his urges, his thoughts, and the environment around him. But the obsessed man, the man who rises, builds something different inside himself. A psychological lock that seals his purpose at the center of his consciousness and refuses to let anything weaken it. This lock has 3 layers. 1. The lock against your emotions. Emotions are not the enemy, but they are a force you cannot allow to lead. Most men crumble because they let emotion decide their behavior. I don't feel like it. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I don't have motivation. These thoughts are not real obstacles. They are mental parasites, weak programs from the emotional brain designed to protect comfort, not progress. When your mind is locked, emotions no longer negotiate with your purpose. You act independently of how you feel. You execute whether you're inspired or not. You move even when your emotions resist you. A locked mind does not ask for permission. It issues commands. Your feelings become background noise. Your purpose becomes the only signal. 2. The lock against distraction. Distraction is the modern form of psychological decay. It fragments your identity, fractures your intentions, and steals the energy required for deep focus. But here is the truth. You cannot be obsessed and distracted at the same time. Choose one. The locked mind does not rely on trying to focus. It restructures the environment so distraction becomes biologically impossible. This is where cognitive hardening becomes real. You remove access to the things that weaken you. You create ritualized spaces where only one identity exists, the focused identity. You use friction to your advantage. Harder to access distractions, easier to access your mission. You build a daily architecture that forces your mind into singularity. Obsession is a system, not a mood. A locked environment produces a locked mind. 3. The lock against the old you. This is the hardest layer, the one most men never complete. Your old identity doesn't die quietly. It fights, it seduces, it whispers comfort. It reappears every time you're tired, stressed, or uncertain. It is the version of you built on laziness, insecurity, avoidance, emotional indulgence, short-term comfort, cheap dopamine, weak focus, lack of precision, victim thinking, inconsistency. This identity cannot coexist with obsession. Your mission is to bury it, not negotiate with it. The internal lock is activated when the old you loses all influence over your decisions. When that voice appears, and it will, you suffocate it with immediate action. You respond with aggression, not patience. You don't argue with it, you erase it. Because obsession is a rebirth. And rebirth requires execution, not conversation. You decide the man you are becoming, and then you lock the door, so nothing inside you can drag you back. The final element of the internal lock: identity consistency. Most men fail because their identity shifts depending on mood, environment, social pressure, validation, energy levels, convenience. But obsession requires identity consistency, being the same focused, disciplined, dangerous version of yourself, regardless of circumstance. This is the moment obsession becomes real, when your behavior stops depending on your state and starts depending on your mission. The internal lock transforms your purpose into your default mode. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. This is why obsessed men never break. Their identity does not allow it. Rule 3. Collapse your world into one target. Obsession is not intensity, it is reduction. Not adding more goals, but destroying everything that isn't the goal. Most men live in a state of fragmentation. Their attention is shattered, their direction is split, their energy is scattered across dozens of micro-purposes that mean nothing. Small habits, half-dreams, irrelevant tasks, social distractions, emotional flare-ups, other people's expectations, short-term dopamine traps, 5-minute impulses masquerading as priorities. They have no chance of becoming dangerous, powerful, focused, or exceptional because their life's energy is leaking in 100 directions at once. What destroys most men is not lack of effort, it is lack of concentration. To build the obsessed mind, the mind that locks in and never breaks, you must collapse your world into one target, one mission, one battle worth sacrificing everything else for. This is the beginning of the psychological singularity, the merging of identity and purpose. The 3 stages of collapsing your world. 1. Total purpose clarity, brutally choosing one mission. Here is the truth no one wants to accept. You cannot chase multiple purposes and expect to create obsession. Obsession requires exclusivity, a singular gravitational pull, a mission that absorbs your thoughts, decisions, discipline, and energy. This is the first internal war you must win. The war against maybe. Maybe I want this. Maybe I want that. Maybe I will try both. Maybe someday. Maybe is the vocabulary of the unfocused, the language of deluded men, the birthplace of mediocrity. Your mission must be a decision that eliminates alternatives, a line drawn in the mind, not the sand. Once you choose the target, everything else becomes irrelevant. And irrelevance is the beginning of power. 2. Purpose purification. Erasing competing identities. Most men fail not because they pick the wrong goal, but because they carry multiple identities that contradict it. They want to be focused, but keep the identity of the distracted man. They want to be disciplined, but keep the identity of the comfort seeker. They want to be elite, but keep the identity of the inconsistent. Every identity you preserve becomes an opposing force inside your mind. To collapse your world, you must eliminate these conflicting identities, one by one, with precision, with aggression, with zero hesitation. This purification involves cutting behaviors that don't reinforce the target, erasing habits that dilute your intensity, withdrawing from environments that weaken your focus, abandoning personas built for social approval, replacing emotional impulses with deliberate execution, choosing discomfort over familiarity every single time. Your identity becomes a single blade, sharpened on one purpose. This is how obsession begins to feel like destiny, not discipline. 3. Environmental constriction. Engineering a world where you can't escape the target. A man is only as strong as the environment that surrounds him. If your world offers easy distraction, constant stimulation, instant dopamine, emotional chaos, social noise, and comfort always within reach, then obsession will die before it ever forms. The obsessed mind requires an environment that funnels you into the mission, not through motivation, but through structural inevitability. This is where you weaponize your surroundings. Reduce your digital world to only what serves your purpose. Remove physical clutter to reduce cognitive fragmentation. Build routines that lead into your mission by default. Limit access to people who drain focus or energy. Create friction around every distraction. Use cues and triggers that repeatedly pull you back into the target. You are building a psychological funnel, a world that forces concentration and strangles dilution. In such an environment, obsession becomes the path of least resistance. The core of Rule 3, your world shrinks, your power expands. Most people fear narrowing their world. They think focusing on one thing makes life smaller. But the opposite is true. When your world collapses into a single direction, your power expands into something unrecognizable. The man who focuses on everything becomes weak at everything. The man who focuses on one thing becomes unstoppable at it. Obsession is not losing freedom, it is gaining force. Not shrinking life, but sharpening it. When your world is narrow, your will becomes absolute. When your purpose is singular, your mind becomes unbreakable. This is the path to becoming the man whose intensity cannot be interrupted, whose direction cannot be influenced, whose mission cannot be weakened. You collapse your world so that you can conquer it. Rule 4. Turn pain into fuel. Pain breaks most men, not because pain is inherently destructive, but because they interpret it through the lens of weakness. The average man feels discomfort and retreats. He feels emotional friction and collapses. He feels pressure and interprets it as a sign to stop. He has been conditioned to treat pain as a signal of danger rather than a signal of transformation. But the obsessed man, the man building a mind that locks in and never breaks, learns to convert pain into propulsion. Not endure it, not tolerate it, not survive it, but use it. Pain becomes the engine, the fuel, the sharpening stone. This is not motivation. This is metamorphosis. The 3 forms of pain you must harness. To weaponize pain, you must understand its types, because each type builds a different layer of your inner architecture. 1. Physical pain, the foundation of hardening. Your body is the first battlefield. Physical discomfort teaches a lesson the mind cannot ignore. The world does not care how you feel, and neither should you. Hard training, cold exposure, exhaustion, micro-injuries, hunger, fatigue, every physical strain becomes a neurological imprint that says, I can suffer and continue. Most men plateau because they train for results, but the obsessed man trains for threshold expansion. This is why physical pain becomes foundational. It is the most direct, unfiltered, undeniable confrontation with weakness. When you harden the body, you begin hardening the mind through biofeedback. Resistance to fatigue becomes mental tolerance. Controlled suffering becomes emotional stability. Endurance becomes identity. Discipline becomes instinct. You aren't just getting stronger, you're becoming someone who cannot be broken by pressure. 2. Emotional pain. The crucible of detachment. Emotional pain destroys more men than physical pain ever could. Why? Because emotional pain targets identity, not flesh. Loss, betrayal, rejection, abandonment, humiliation. These are the emotional weapons that break the unfocused man. But for the obsessed man, emotional pain is the fire that burns away the unnecessary parts of the self. Here is the truth most men never learn. Emotional suffering is the raw material of detachment. You cannot become indifferent, disciplined, or strategically cold if you have never experienced emotional pain deeply and consciously. Here is how emotional pain becomes fuel. You study your triggers. You observe your reactions without obeying them. You detach from the need for validation. You reframe emotion as information, not identity. You build a mind that no longer responds to the world's attempts to provoke it. Emotional pain is the chisel that sculpts the inner statue. the carving away of every fragile dependency. Every time you process suffering without collapsing, you build a colder, sharper version of yourself. 3. Existential pain, the birthplace of obsession. This is the deepest form of human suffering. The pain of not being enough, the pain of wasted potential, the pain of looking in the mirror and seeing a diluted version of who you could be. Most men run from this pain with distractions, addictions, entertainment, meaningless relationships, empty goals. But the obsessed man stares directly into it because existential pain, when confronted, becomes nuclear fuel. Existential suffering is the fire that says, I refuse to die as the man I currently am. This pain drives extreme focus, radical discipline, violent elimination of distractions, obsessive dedication to a mission, complete restructuring of identity. Existential pain is what makes the mission feel necessary, not optional. This is the birthplace of true obsession, the alchemy of pain, turning suffering into domination. Pain stops being pain the moment you assign it a purpose. This is the alchemy every powerful man performs, transforming discomfort into concentration, pressure into precision, suffering into strength. Most men think power comes from talent or luck. It doesn't. Power comes from pain consciously processed and aggressively repurposed. Here is the formula: pain, understanding, adaptation, hardening, evolution. Every piece of suffering becomes a tool. Every setback becomes a sharpening. Every emotional wound becomes a discipline. Every physical test becomes a proof of resilience. Pain becomes the language of transformation, and you become fluent in it. The man who fears pain remains ordinary. The man who uses pain becomes unstoppable. The core of Rule 4: seek discomfort voluntarily. Pain that happens to you creates fear. Pain you choose creates power. Voluntary discomfort changes your relationship with reality. Hard work stops feeling hard. Discipline stops feeling like sacrifice. Pressure stops feeling intimidating. Chaos stops feeling overwhelming. You no longer break under conditions that destroy other men. You don't endure pain, you consume it. And in that consumption, you evolve into a version of yourself that cannot be swayed, shaken, distracted, or discouraged. This is how obsession becomes unbreakable. This is how a man becomes inevitable. This is how the world stops having leverage over you. Obsession is not a mindset. It's not a strategy. It's not a motivational spark. Obsession is a rebirth. The moment a man chooses a mission so important that everything else becomes irrelevant, he stops living like everyone else. The average man negotiates with his goals. The obsessed man kneels to nothing. He isolates, not out of weakness, but because the path he walks cannot fit the noise, the softness, or the distractions of ordinary people. He sacrifices comfort. He gives up pleasures. He lets parts of himself die, and in return, he becomes someone the world can't process, a man whose focus is so sharp it cuts through resistance, whose discipline is so total it bends reality around his direction, and whose identity becomes an instrument of absolute execution. This is the principle. When your mission becomes the center of your universe, you stop needing motivation. You become the force that moves the world. Obsession is evolution. Obsession is isolation. Obsession is destiny forged by choice. Build the mind that locks in. Build the identity that never breaks. Build the life that serves one purpose, and watch the world follow the man who refuses to look away from what he was born to create.